October 31st, 1947, 10:37 p.m. The Rhythm Club on Lenox Avenue and 133rd Street was packed for Halloween night. 243 patrons dancing to Count Basie's orchestra, drinking Prohibition-era cocktails that were now gloriously legal, celebrating in the kind of joyous defiance that made Harlem the cultural heartbeat of Black America. Inside the club's private back office, Bumpy Johnson sat with his wife Mamie and their 2 daughters, reviewing the night's receipts. It was a rare family moment. Bumpy usually kept business and family rigidly separated, but Halloween had always been special. His daughters, dressed as princesses, had insisted on seeing Daddy's club before heading home. At 10:37 p.m., the club's doorman, a former heavyweight boxer named Samuel Big Sam Edwards, noticed something that made his blood run cold. 22 white men were assembling across Lenox Avenue. Not scattered, not casual, organized. They arrived in 7 vehicles, 4 trucks, 3 sedans, all parking in coordinated positions that blocked both ends of the street. The men wore civilian clothes, but Big Sam recognized the telltale signs. Identical work boots, similar jackets, and most damningly, several carried wooden axe handles, the Klan's weapon of choice for legal violence that couldn't be classified as firearms. According to testimony Big Sam would later give to the NAACP, he counted exactly 22 men. He noted that several had Georgia license plates, and he saw one man, tall, red-haired, with a scar running down his left cheek, pull something from his jacket that caught the streetlight. A white hood, folded but visible. Big Sam had grown up in Alabama. He knew exactly what he was looking at. He locked the Rhythm Club's front door. The sound, a heavy brass deadbolt sliding into place, echoed through the club's entrance hallway loud enough that Bumpy, sitting in his office 40 feet away, heard it clearly. Bumpy knew his doorman. Big Sam had worked security for 5 years, had handled everything from drunk patrons to rival gang members without ever locking the door during business hours. The club's philosophy was simple: always stay open, always stay welcoming, always project confidence. If Big Sam was locking the door, something was catastrophically wrong. Bumpy stood, walked to his office door, and called out, "Sam, what's happening?" Big Sam's voice came back steady but urgent. "Boss, you need to get your family to the back exit. Now, we got Klan outside. 22 of them. They're organizing for something." Inside the club, the music continued. Dancers kept dancing. Most patrons had no idea that outside, 24 white supremacists were preparing an attack on Harlem's most prominent social club, owned by Harlem's most dangerous man, while his wife and children were inside. Mamie Johnson's face went pale. "Bumpy, the girls. Stay calm," Bumpy said quietly, though his mind was already calculating angles, options, resources. "Sam, how long before they move?" "They're waiting for something, boss. More people maybe. Or they're trying to decide how to do this without starting a full riot." Because that was the Klan's problem in 1947 Harlem. They weren't in Mississippi where they could operate with law enforcement protection. They were in a neighborhood of 230,000 black residents who'd already survived one riot in 1935 and another in 1943, who'd learned that sometimes survival meant fighting back, and who absolutely would not tolerate white supremacist violence on their streets. If the Klan attacked the Rhythm Club, they'd face more than Bumpy Johnson's organization. They'd face Harlem itself. But first, they had to make a move. And for 7 minutes, from 10:37 p.m. to 10:44 p.m., the 22 men just waited, watching the club, blocking the street, creating the kind of tension that makes time feel elastic, that turns minutes into hours, that forces everyone inside to confront a terrible question. What were they waiting for? The answer would emerge at 10:44 p.m. when a 23rd vehicle arrived. A police car from the 32nd Precinct, carrying 2 NYPD officers who parked directly beside the Klan gathering, stepped out of their vehicle and began talking casually with the white supremacists like they were old friends catching up. Because they were. According to FBI surveillance files declassified in 2003, at least 14 NYPD officers from Harlem precincts were documented Klan sympathizers in 1947. The FBI knew. Internal Affairs knew. City Hall knew. And now, Bumpy Johnson, watching through a crack in the Rhythm Club's curtains, knew that this wasn't just a Klan attack. This was a Klan attack with police protection. His family was trapped inside. 243 patrons were dancing, drinking, completely unaware that they were about to become targets in a confrontation that would either end with mass violence or demonstrate whether Bumpy Johnson's reputation for strategic genius was deserved. The next 47 minutes would determine which. And it would all start with a decision Bumpy made in the next 90 seconds. A decision that would save lives, destroy careers, and prove that sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun. It's knowing exactly who to call when the world tries to kill you. To understand why 22 Klan members thought they could attack Bumpy Johnson's club with police support, you need to understand the invisible war that had been building in post-World War II Harlem. 1947 was a year of contradictions. Black soldiers had returned from defeating fascism in Europe, only to face segregation, discrimination, and violence at home. The Double V campaign, victory against fascism abroad, victory against racism domestically, had raised expectations that America wasn't meeting. Harlem's population had swelled to over 230,000 residents, with thousands of veterans demanding the rights they'd fought for. The Klan saw this as an existential threat. Between 1945 and 1947, Klan membership surged from approximately 30,000 to over 100,000 nationally as white supremacists organized against what they perceived as Negro advancement. They targeted returning black veterans, bombed black churches in the South, and increasingly attempted operations in northern cities. New York, with its massive black population and growing civil rights activism, became a priority target. But Harlem in 1947 wasn't Birmingham or Jackson. It had its own power structures, its own leaders, its own capacity for organized resistance. Bumpy Johnson sat at the center of those structures. By October 1947, Johnson was 42 years old and had controlled significant portions of Harlem's numbers racket, legitimate businesses, and political influence for over a decade. His organization employed an estimated 400 people directly. He owned the Rhythm Club, 2 funeral homes, a taxi service, and had investments in over 30 Harlem businesses. More importantly, he'd built relationships that transcended the criminal underworld. Ministers who appreciated his charitable donations, politicians who needed his political machine to win elections, police officers who took his payments but also respected his ability to maintain order, and community members who saw him as protection against both white violence and internal crime. The Rhythm Club itself was a symbol of that power. Located at 2169 Lenox Avenue, the club occupied a 3-story building Johnson had purchased in 1941. The ground floor held the main club, capacity 300, featuring live music 6 nights a week from jazz legends including Duke Ellington, Count Basie, and Cab Calloway. The second floor contained private gambling rooms that generated thousands weekly. The third floor served as Johnson's operational headquarters. The club represented everything the Klan hated: black economic success, cultural achievement, and visible power in a neighborhood white supremacists believed should remain subordinate. And on October 31st, 1947, a group of Klan enforcers, primarily from Georgia and South Carolina, with local New York sympathizers, decided to send a message by attacking the most visible symbol of Black Harlem's autonomy. They chose Halloween night deliberately. Massive crowds would be on the streets, chaos would provide cover, and the symbolic destruction of a black-owned business during a celebration would demonstrate white supremacist reach. What they didn't calculate was that Bumpy Johnson had been preparing for exactly this scenario for years. Inside the locked Rhythm Club, Bumpy moved quickly. He sent Mamie and his daughters to the basement storage area, reinforced with a separate exit to the alley, designed specifically as a panic room for family emergencies. Then he gathered his key lieutenants, who happened to be in the club that night. Clarence "Cat" Williams, head of security, had been dancing with his wife when Big Sam locked the door. Cat was 6'4", 245 pounds of Korean War combat veteran who'd survived 3 years of warfare and returned to Harlem with tactical skills that made him invaluable. Junie Bird, Johnson's nephew and operational manager, had been overseeing the gambling rooms upstairs. At 28, Junie had the sharp mind of an accountant and the street instincts of someone who'd grown up in Johnson's organization. Theodore "Teddy" Simmons, the political fixer, had been having drinks with a city council candidate. Teddy's Rolodex contained every influential person in Harlem, and many outside it. And Solomon "Sol" Greenberg, the accountant who handled Johnson's finances, had been reviewing the week's receipts. Sol wasn't muscle, wasn't an enforcer, but his strategic thinking had saved Johnson's organization more times than violence ever could. 5 men, facing 22 Klan members with police support. Options, Bumpy said simply, gathering them in the office. Cat spoke first. We've got 17 people in this building who can fight. We're armed. We could hold them off until NYPD backup arrives. Real backup, not those 2 collaborators outside. How many patrons would die while we're holding them off? Bumpy asked. Silence. Because everyone knew the answer. Dozens. A firefight in a crowded club would be catastrophic. Junie offered a different approach. We could evacuate through the back. Get everyone out before they move. Sacrifice the building, but save lives. And let them burn down the Rhythm Club? Bumpy shook his head. That's not a loss we can afford. If we run, every white supremacist group learns that Harlem can be intimidated. Next week, they hit another business. Then another. We don't stop them here. We don't stop them at all. Teddy Simmons pulled out his phone, one of the few private lines in Harlem. I can call the mayor's office. Get real NYPD response. But it'll take 20 minutes minimum. We don't have 20 minutes, Big Sam interjected from the doorway. They're getting organized. I see them passing around weapons. They're about to move. Sol Greenberg, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. What if we don't fight them and don't run? What if we make them irrelevant? Everyone looked at him. Explain, Bumpy said. Sol smiled. A cold, calculating expression. They want violence. They want to terrorize this club, create chaos, prove white supremacy through fear. What if we give them something they're not prepared for? What if we make them look like fools instead of terrorists? Ow! Cat demanded. We call every news outlet in New York, Sol said. Every photographer, every reporter, every radio station. We tell them there's a Klan attack happening right now in Harlem. Live. Documented. And we make sure that when these 22 idiots make their move, they're doing it on camera, in front of witnesses, creating evidence that will send them to federal prison. Bumpy was silent for 10 seconds, processing the strategy. Then he smiled. Teddy, start calling. Every media contact you have. Tell them we've got a live Klan attack on Lenox Avenue, and they have 15 minutes to get here before they miss the story of the year. What about the patrons? Junie asked. 200 people are still dancing out there. We keep them dancing, Bumpy said. We keep the music playing, keep the lights on, keep everything normal. Because the moment we panic, the Klan wins, even if they never break down the door. Cat, position your security at every entrance, but don't engage unless they break in. Big Sam, you stay at that front door. Nobody gets in, but more importantly, make sure everybody can see you're keeping them out. And you? Cat asked. Bumpy walked to the window, looking at the 22 men across Lenox Avenue who thought they were about to terrorize Harlem's most powerful black man. I'm going to make a phone call that's going to change everything. 10:51 p.m. Bumpy Johnson sat at his desk, picked up his private line, and dialed a number he'd been given 3 years earlier with explicit instructions. Only call this an absolute emergency. The phone rang twice. A voice answered. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Special Agent Thomas Morrison. Agent Morrison, this is Ellsworth Johnson. We spoke in 1944 about the Harlem riot prevention. There was a pause, Morrison recognizing the name, processing why Harlem's most notorious criminal was calling the FBI directly. Mr. Johnson, this line is for emergencies. 22 Klan members are currently surrounding my business on Lenox Avenue. Bumpy interrupted. They're armed with axe handles and other weapons. 2 NYPD officers from the 32nd Precinct are providing them support instead of dispersing them. My club contains 243 civilians, including my family. If you want to prevent a massacre and catch Klan members committing federal crimes on camera, you have approximately 15 minutes to get agents here. Another pause. Longer this time. You're serious, Morrison said. Dead serious. And I've got 7 news outlets on their way to document everything. Your choice. FBI arrives and gets credit for stopping Klan violence, or you explain tomorrow why federal agents ignored a credible threat that resulted in casualties. Your move, Agent Morrison. Morrison made his decision in 3 seconds. Don't engage them. Keep civilians safe. Agents are rolling now. ETA, 14 minutes. Bumpy hung up and turned to his lieutenants. FBI's coming. Now we buy time. Outside, the Klan was getting impatient. The man with the red hair and scar, later identified as Clayton Wilkes, a Georgia Klan organizer with suspected involvement in 3 lynchings, was arguing with the 2 NYPD officers. According to later FBI surveillance transcripts pieced together from witness statements, the conversation went like this. Wilkes, we came here to send a message. You said there wouldn't be interference. Officer Patrick Sullivan, 32nd Precinct, later fired and indicted. I said I'd look the other way, not that I'd help you commit assault. There's a difference. Officer Dennis Murphy, also later indicted, you've got 200 people in that club. You attack it, you start a full-scale riot. Then we can't protect you. Wilkes, we didn't come here to be protected. We came here to show these Northern N that we can reach them anywhere. Sullivan, then do it quick and get out, because I'm not dying for your ideology. At 10:56 p.m., Wilkes made his decision. He signaled to his 21 associates. They began crossing Lenox Avenue, moving toward the Rhythm Club's entrance, axe handles visible, several men pulling white hoods over their faces in broad display of Klan affiliation. Inside the club, Big Sam stood at the locked door, watching them approach. Cat Williams positioned himself with 12 armed security personnel at strategic points throughout the building. And Bumpy made one more call. This one to Adam Clayton Powell, Jr., Harlem's congressman and the most politically powerful black man in America. Adam, it's Bumpy. I need you to do something unusual. Get to Lenox and 133rd immediately. Bring cameras if you have them. The Klan is attacking my club right now, and I need elected officials witnessing this. Powell, to his credit, didn't hesitate. On my way. 10 minutes. By 10:58 p.m., the trap was set. 22 Klan members approaching the door. FBI agents en route. Media being notified. A congressman coming to bear witness. And 243 civilians inside, still dancing to Count Basie, completely unaware that they were about to become part of the most documented Klan attack in Northern history. At 10:59 p.m., Clayton Wilkes reached the Rhythm Club's front door. He pounded on it 3 times with his axe handle. Open up, he shouted. We're coming in whether you unlock it or not. Big Sam, standing on the other side of the heavy oak door, responded loud enough for everyone inside to hear. This is private property. You're trespassing. Leave now or face legal consequences. Wilkes laughed, a sound recorded by a street vendor's nearby radio that happened to be broadcasting. Legal consequences? Boy, we are the law. Now open this door before we break it down. No, Big Sam said simply. And that refusal, one word, spoken by a former boxer standing alone against 22 armed white supremacists, became the moment that defined everything that followed. Because Wilkes had expected fear. He'd expected submission. He'd expected that threatening violence would make Black Harlem cower. Instead, he got defiance. And defiance required escalation. At 11:02 p.m., Wilkes ordered his men to break down the door. 4 Klan members charged it simultaneously, using their axe handles as battering rams. The door held. Reinforced oak, installed specifically for security, designed to withstand exactly this kind of attack. They tried again, and again. The door held. Inside, patrons were finally noticing something was wrong. The music had stopped. Dancers were moving toward the back. Cat Williams was quietly directing people to emergency exits, keeping calm, preventing panic. Bumpy stood in his office doorway, watching his security team manage the evacuation with practiced precision, knowing that every second they delayed the Klan's entry was another second for help to arrive. At 11:05 p.m., the first news photographer arrived. James Patterson from the Amsterdam News, camera in hand, positioned himself across Lenox Avenue and began documenting everything. 22 white men attacking a black-owned business, 2 NYPD officers standing aside, Klan hoods visible, weapons brandishing. At 11:07 p.m., 3 more journalists arrived from the New York Times, the Daily News, and PM newspaper. At 11:08 p.m., Congressman Adam Clayton Powell Jr. pulled up in his Cadillac, saw the scene unfolding, and immediately began taking notes for what would become a congressional floor speech about Klan violence in northern cities. And at 11:09 p.m., the Klan finally breached the door. The oak splintered. The lock gave way. 22 men poured into the Rhythm Club's entrance, shouting, brandishing weapons, fully expecting to find terrified black patrons they could terrorize. Instead, they found an empty club. Every civilian had been evacuated through back exits. Every table was abandoned mid-drink. The only people remaining, Big Sam, standing at the bar with his arms crossed, and Cat Williams with 12 security personnel positioned throughout the room, all armed, all ready, all waiting. "You're trespassing," Big Sam said calmly, "and you're being photographed doing it." Every news outlet in New York now has evidence of Klan violence. Every second you stay here adds years to your federal prison sentence. Your choice: leave now or become famous for all the wrong reasons. Clayton Wilkes looked around, finally understanding the trap. The club was empty. The violence he'd planned couldn't happen without victims. And outside, cameras were flashing, documenting everything. He'd walked into a perfectly orchestrated exposure operation. And at 11:11 p.m., FBI agents arrived. 12 federal agents, led by Special Agent Morrison, surrounded the building with weapons drawn. "Federal Bureau of Investigation," Morrison announced through a megaphone. "Everyone inside the Rhythm Club, exit immediately with your hands visible." The Klan members looked at each other, realizing they had seconds to decide: fight federal agents on camera or surrender and face prosecution. 21 of them chose surrender. Clayton Wilkes chose something else. 11:12 p.m. Clayton Wilkes stood in the center of the Rhythm Club's main room, surrounded by 21 Klan members who were slowly lowering their weapons and moving toward exits as FBI agents commanded. But Wilkes wasn't surrendering. He grabbed the nearest person, a young woman named Dorothy Small who worked as a coat check attendant and had been helping with the evacuation. In one motion, Wilkes pulled her in front of him and pressed a knife against her throat. "Nobody moves," Wilkes shouted. "I walk out of here free, or this girl dies." The room froze. FBI agents at the entrance stopped advancing. Cat Williams, who'd been positioned near the stage, kept his hand on his concealed weapon but didn't draw. Big Sam remained motionless at the bar. And Bumpy Johnson, who'd been watching from his office doorway, walked calmly into the main room. "Let her go," Bumpy said quietly. Wilkes's eyes locked onto Johnson, finally face to face with the man he'd come to terrorize. "You're the gangster? You don't look like much." "Neither do you," Bumpy replied. "You look like a coward who needs 21 friends and a hostage to feel powerful. But here's what you don't understand. You've already lost. I brought a knife to this girl's throat. How have I lost?" Bumpy smiled, a cold expression that made Wilkes's confidence waver. "Because you're on camera, holding a black woman hostage, in front of FBI agents, journalists, and a United States congressman. Every second you hold her adds years to your sentence. And even if you somehow escape tonight, every law enforcement agency in America now knows your face, your name, and your crimes. If this story of strategic power and survival is gripping you as much as it gripped Harlem that night, subscribe now, because what happens next change how entire communities thought about resistance." Wilkes's hand shook slightly. "I'll kill her. I swear I'll." "No, you won't," Bumpy interrupted, "because you're not actually willing to die tonight. You came here thinking you'd terrorize unarmed civilians and leave as a hero. Instead, you're surrounded by federal agents who will shoot you the second you hurt that woman. Your friends are surrendering. Your police protection has disappeared. And you're holding the knees of Reverend David Henderson from Mount Zion Baptist Church. Wilkes's face went pale. How did you? I know everyone in this neighborhood, Bumpy said, including Dorothy's uncle, who has more political influence than you can imagine. You hurt her, and it's not just FBI charges. It's community fury. It's national headlines. It's becoming the face of Klan terrorism that destroys your entire organization's credibility. Special Agent Morrison, positioned at the entrance, spoke through his megaphone. Mr. Wilkes, you have 10 seconds to release the hostage. Otherwise, federal snipers will resolve this situation. There were no federal snipers. Morrison was bluffing. But Wilkes didn't know that. For 15 seconds, nobody moved. Then Bumpy did something extraordinary. He walked directly toward Wilkes, hands visible, no weapon, moving with the calm confidence of someone who knew he held all the real power in this room. Here's what's going to happen, Bumpy said, now just 5 feet from Wilkes. You're going to release Dorothy. You're going to surrender to the FBI. And in exchange, I'm going to make sure that when this story gets told, you're remembered as a failed terrorist rather than a murderer. Your children will know you made a mistake, but they won't have to live with knowing you killed an innocent woman. That's the only mercy you're getting tonight. Wilkes stared at Bumpy, trying to understand how this black gangster was offering him terms while he held the knife and the hostage. Finally, Wilkes's hand lowered. Dorothy Small pulled away, running toward Cat Williams, who immediately moved her to safety. Wilkes dropped the knife. FBI agents swarmed in, tackling Wilkes to the ground, cuffing him so roughly that he cried out in pain. And Bumpy Johnson turned to Special Agent Morrison. I believe you'll find weapons violations, conspiracy to commit violence, kidnapping, assault, and based on those Klan hoods, federal civil rights violations. More than enough for a long sentence. Morrison nodded slowly, processing what he'd just witnessed. Bumpy Johnson had just talked down a hostage situation more effectively than most trained negotiators could have managed. Mr. Johnson, Morrison said carefully, I'll need statement from you and your staff about tonight's events. Of course, Bumpy replied. But first, I need to check on my family and ensure my patrons are safe. Then, I'm happy to cooperate with any federal investigation. Outside, the scene was controlled chaos. All 22 Klan members were in FBI custody, being loaded into federal transport vehicles. Photographers captured everything. White supremacists in handcuffs, federal agents processing arrests, and most damningly, the 2 NYPD officers who'd been providing Klan support trying to quietly disappear into the crowd. Congressman Adam Clayton Powell Jr. stopped them. Officers Sullivan and Murphy. Powell called out loud enough for every journalist to hear. I'd like to ask you some questions about your presence here tonight. Both officers froze. Were you aware that Klan members were assembling on this street? Powell continued. Sullivan stammered. We were monitoring the situation by standing beside them and having casual conversations while they prepared to attack a business. Powell's voice carried the righteous anger of a man who'd spent his entire career fighting exactly this kind of collaboration. I'll be filing a formal complaint with the police commissioner first thing tomorrow. And I'll be asking the FBI to investigate whether NYPD officers collaborated with domestic terrorists. The journalists loved it. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled furiously. This was no longer just a story about a Klan attack. This was a story about police corruption, about federal intervention, about how Harlem fought back. By 11:47 p.m., the street had been secured. FBI agents began processing evidence. The broken door, the weapons, the Klan hoods, everything needed to build federal conspiracy charges. Bumpy's security team started assessing damage and preparing the club for eventual repairs. And inside the now-empty Rhythm Club, Bumpy sat with Mamie and his daughters, holding them close, processing how narrowly they'd avoided catastrophe. Daddy, his oldest daughter, asked, "Why didn't you just let them have a club? It's just a building." Bumpy looked at his child, trying to find words to explain what the Rhythm Club represented, not just to him, but to all of Harlem. "Baby girl," he said quietly, "if I'd let them have this building tonight, tomorrow they try to take someone else's. Then another. Then another. Sometimes you can't run from bullies. Sometimes you have to stand and prove they can't take what's yours. Not because the building matters, but because showing strength is the only thing that prevents them from coming back." His daughter considered this, then asked, "Did we win?" Bumpy smiled. "Yes, we won." But outside, loading the last Klan member into federal custody, Special Agent Morrison was thinking about everything he'd witnessed and coming to an uncomfortable conclusion. Bumpy Johnson had just orchestrated one of the most effective counterterrorism operations Morrison had ever seen. Better than most FBI operations. More strategic. More effective. And it had been executed by a man the Bureau was supposed to be investigating as a criminal. The contradiction was too complex to resolve tonight. November 1st, 1947. 6:47 a.m. The front page of the New York Times carried a photograph that would define the next decade of civil rights history. 22 Klan members in handcuffs being escorted by FBI agents outside the Rhythm Club, with Bumpy Johnson visible in the background, arms crossed, watching. The headline, FBI arrests 22 in Klan attack on Harlem nightclub. Police officers under investigation. The Amsterdam news was more direct. Harlem fights back. Bumpy Johnson outsmarts Klan, saves lives. The Daily News, Halloween horror. Fed stop KKK attack in Pack Club. By 8 a.m., the story had been picked up by wire services across America. By 10 a.m., radio stations nationwide were discussing the incident. By noon, Congressman Powell was on the House floor demanding federal investigation of police collaboration with the Klan. The public reaction was overwhelming. Praise for the FBI's swift action, outrage at NYPD corruption, and cautious respect for how Bumpy Johnson had protected his community. But in rooms far from public view, other conversations were happening. At FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., Director J. Edgar Hoover was reading Special Agent Morrison's report with growing concern. The report was admirably detailed about the arrests, the evidence collected, the federal charges being pursued. It was notably vague about exactly how the FBI had been alerted so quickly. Hoover called Morrison directly. "Agent, your report mentions receiving a tip about the Klan attack." "From whom?" Morrison chose his words carefully. "A concerned citizen with knowledge of extremist activity in the area, sir." This concerned citizen wouldn't happen to be Ellsworth Johnson, would it? Silence on the line. "Agent Morrison," Hoover continued, "I don't care that you coordinated with a known criminal to stop terrorism. I care that you're not being honest about it in your reports. Fix this. Document everything. Because if this becomes public, I need to be able to defend our methods." "Yes, sir." "And Morrison, good work. Those arrests will stand up in court. But remember, Johnson helped us this time. That doesn't make him an ally. It makes him a strategic opportunist who recognized aligning with us served his interests. Don't confuse cooperation with loyalty." The call ended, and Morrison understood the message. Use Johnson when necessary, but never trust him. Meanwhile, at the 32nd Precinct, a very different conversation was occurring. Police Commissioner Arthur Wallander had arrived personally to address the station. Officers Sullivan and Murphy had been suspended immediately after Congressman Powell's public accusation. Now, they sat in an interrogation room while Internal Affairs built a case that would destroy their careers. "You collaborated with known Klan members," Wallander said, his voice cold, "while they attacked a business filled with civilians, including children. Do you understand that you're not just facing termination? You're facing federal conspiracy charges." Sullivan, realizing his career was over regardless of what he said, decided honesty might reduce his sentence. "We've been taking payments from white supremacist groups for 3 years. Different groups, Klan, German-American Bund sympathizers, others. They pay us to look the other way when they hold meetings, when they distribute literature, when they recruit. Last night wasn't different. We thought we were just looking the other way while they intimidated some nightclub. We didn't know they'd actually attack." "So you're admitting to systematic corruption," Wallander said. I'm admitting we did what dozens of other officers do. The only difference is we got caught on camera. That admission, that NYPD corruption extended beyond 2 officers, would trigger investigations that lasted 3 years and resulted in 47 terminations. But the most significant conversation was happening at 409 Edgecombe Avenue, where Bumpy Johnson sat with his inner circle reviewing the consequences of their victory. "We won," Cat Williams said. 22 arrests. National headlines. "The Klan won't try this again." "We survived," Bumpy corrected. "There's a difference. Yes, we stopped them. Yes, we exposed them. But we also revealed every tool in our arsenal. The FBI now knows I'll cooperate when it serves my interests. The NYPD knows I have contacts at the federal level. Every criminal organization in New York knows I'm willing to work with law enforcement." "That's bad," Junie Bird asked. "It's complicated," Bumpy replied. "It protects us from white supremacist violence. But it makes us look like informants to other organizations. It creates questions about loyalty that could destabilize our relationships with Italian families, Irish gangs, anyone who operates outside the law." Sol Greenberg nodded. "You've positioned yourself as Harlem's protector, but at the cost of your outlaw credibility." "Exactly," Bumpy said. "So we need to be very careful about how we move forward. We won this battle, but the war for how we're perceived, for maintaining power, for protecting this community, that war just got more complicated." Madame Stephanie St. Clair, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. "You did the right thing. Protecting your family, protecting civilians, protecting the Rhythm Club, all of it was right. If other criminals distrust you because you prevented a massacre, that says more about them than you." "Maybe," Bumpy agreed. "But perception matters in this business. Trust matters. And last night, I showed everyone that I'll work with federal agents when necessary. That's a truth I can't put back in the box." The aftermath continued to unfold over the following weeks. By November 15th, all 22 Klan members had been indicted on federal charges, including conspiracy to commit violence, weapons violations, civil rights violations, and in Clayton Wilkes's case, kidnapping. Prosecutors were pursuing sentences ranging from 10 to 25 years. By November 30th, Officers Sullivan and Murphy had been indicted on federal corruption charges. Both would eventually serve prison time, 7 years for Sullivan, 5 for Murphy. By December 1947, the NYPD had implemented new protocols for investigating officer collaboration with extremist groups, though enforcement remained inconsistent. And by Christmas 1947, the Rhythm Club had reopened with a brand new reinforced door, enhanced security, and a reputation as the place where Harlem fought the Klan and won. But there were costs nobody talked about publicly. Dorothy Small, the hostage, developed severe anxiety that prevented her from returning to work at the Rhythm Club. She eventually left Harlem entirely, moving to Philadelphia, where she could escape the memories. Big Sam, who'd stood at that door facing 22 armed men, began having nightmares. He'd continue working security for Bumpy for 3 more years before retiring, unable to shake the psychological weight of that night. And Bumpy's relationship with his daughters changed. They'd seen their father manage a crisis with stunning effectiveness, but they'd also seen him place them in danger by having them at the club. The balance between his criminal life and his family life, always delicate, became even more fraught. The victory was real. The costs were real too. In the years that followed, when people asked Bumpy about Halloween 1947, he'd always say the same thing. "We did what was necessary." Would I do it again? Yes. Do I wish it had never been necessary? Every single day. The trial of the 22 Klan members began on February 3rd, 1948, in federal court in Manhattan. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence. Photographs of the attack, testimony from FBI agents, statement from witnesses, the broken door from the Rhythm Club itself brought into the courtroom as physical evidence. But the most powerful testimony came from an unlikely source, Bumpy Johnson himself. Called as a witness, Johnson spent 4 hours on the stand describing the attack, the planning that went into protecting civilians, and most devastatingly for the defense, the casual coordination between Klan members and NYPD officers. Defense attorneys tried attacking his credibility, pointing out his criminal record, his numbers operations, his reputation for violence. Johnson's response was simple. You're right. I'm a criminal. I've broken laws, and I won't pretend otherwise. But I've never attacked innocent people. I've never terrorized children. I've never claimed moral superiority while committing terrorism. These men did. And if my testimony helps put them in prison, then at least my criminal life will have served one legitimate purpose. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. Verdict: guilty on all counts for all defendants. Sentences range from 12 years for minor participants to 25 years for Clayton Wilkes, who received additional time for the kidnapping charge. It was the largest successful federal prosecution of Klan violence in Northern history up to that point. The ripple effects extended far beyond individual convictions. The case established legal precedents for prosecuting interstate hate group activity that would be used repeatedly during the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s. Federal prosecutors studying the Rhythm Club case would later apply its strategies to cases in Birmingham, Selma, and Jackson. The exposure of NYPD corruption triggered reforms that, while imperfect, made police collaboration with extremist groups more difficult and more dangerous for officers who attempted it. And most significantly, the case demonstrated to black communities nationwide that strategic resistance, using law, media exposure, and federal intervention, could defeat white supremacist violence more effectively than armed confrontation. Bumpy Johnson would reference the Rhythm Club incident for the rest of his life as proof that smart strategy beats brute force, that temporary alliances serve justice when necessary, and that protecting community sometimes requires working with people you'd normally oppose. By the time of Johnson's death in 1968, the Rhythm Club had become legendary, not just as a jazz venue, but as the place where Harlem proved that organized, strategic resistance could defeat organized hate. Today, the building at 2169 Lenox Avenue still stands, though it's no longer a nightclub. There's no historical marker, no plaque, no official recognition of what happened on Halloween 1947. But in Harlem, the story lives on, passed down through families, documented in oral histories, remembered by the generation who witnessed it and the generations who inherited its lessons. The lesson isn't that violence solves problems. It doesn't. The lesson isn't that working with law enforcement is always right. It isn't. The lesson is that sometimes survival requires using every tool available. Strategic thinking, media exposure, legal systems, community organization, and yes, cooperation with institutions you normally distrust. 22 Klan members waited outside Bumpy Johnson's club, thinking they held all the power. They learned, too late, that power isn't about numbers or weapons or even police support. Real power is understanding your enemy better than they understand themselves, having resources they didn't know existed, and being willing to do whatever it takes to protect your community. Bumpy Johnson demonstrated that power on Halloween 1947. And 22 men spent the next 12 to 25 years in federal prison contemplating their miscalculation. The lock that clicked that night wasn't just protecting a nightclub. It was protecting a principle, that Harlem belonged to the people who built it, lived in it, loved it, and no amount of hatred from outside would ever change that. Some battles are won with bullets. This one was won with brains, courage, and the understanding that sometimes your worst enemies can become your most useful allies. Even if just for one night. Even if just to survive.